It also sounds that there was a certain level of fulfillment you got out of what you were doing. And then in the banks, everything you're saying, I did it because I loved it. So there's some sort of, it sounds like you're chasing a certain level of fulfillment and you are getting it from the roles that you're playing. And as soon as it's not there anymore, you move on to the next thing.
Yes. I guess ultimately, I want to make sure that I'm adding value. I want to make sure that, in the way I determine what, in the way I think value, what value is defined as. I want to make sure that I'm making an impact, I'm changing things. So a role needs to do that. A job needs to do that. And even now, with being self-employed, there are so many opportunities that actually come past us, and one of the criteria as to whether I grab onto it is this going to make a difference? Is this going to add value? So I think that's incredibly important. Otherwise, I think I don't know. There are some people who take on roles and take on jobs and have careers where it's a job, and I'll have my life after work. You can't spend 8, 9, 10 hours a day and not invest a bit of yourself into that. So that was a decision I made early on, and it wasn't a hard decision because I had this other thing happening on the side. And even when the property portfolios weren't, a property portfolio doesn't make a lot of money in the beginning part. For the first 10 years, it doesn't really make a big difference. I was actually building more a balance sheet than I was cash flow at the time. I hadn't.
Chief, let me correct you. You must say the property portfolio I had at the time was not making money in the first 10 years.
Yes.
Because now we're going to give people the impression that they can't make money in the first year, which they can.
They absolutely can. So there was a massive flaw in my property education.
Yeah.
In that I focused because I was, a couple of comments, because I was earning a salary, I was happy to fund my property portfolio.
Yeah.
First mistake. I have, and I had, even today it's self-corrected, but I have some assets in great locations, some properties in great locations in Sandton, which are just a little bit better than break even today because I bought the asset, didn't buy the cash flow. And I didn't realize at the time that by doing that, I'm actually moving backwards. So that was a bit of learning. But I was in corporate. I knew, I've got this portfolio. Actually sitting there at my job in corporate, knowing that I had a property strategy that I was progressing on, gave me the confidence, even if I wasn't making cash flow at the time, any significant cash flow, gave me the confidence to be a lot more confident around the table and choose and really go for the roles and jobs and projects that I wanted to, as opposed to what was necessarily just offered to me or I was told to do.
What was the tipping point when you moved from the strategy that you were doing then to now the cash flow strategy? Now it sounds like the one that you were doing, it was more on capital gains and capital accumulation as well as asset accumulation. Whether or not you had cash flow, that didn't really matter. But at what point did you say, now we're moving into making money from this portfolio?
It was about 6 years ago, very recently.
Only 6 years ago?
That I was repositioned. I wasn't retrenched.
Yeah.
I was repositioned.
Reshuffling.
Reshuffled. And, this happens. And so a couple of things. You realize that those decisions are made by people who don't even know you, don't know your role. And it wasn't just me, it was broad. And you realize that in a corporate machine, you are really just a cog. Okay. And I was happy to be there to do that, and provide value, with the thought, and maybe I was a bit naive, with the expectation that people would appreciate the value and reciprocate. What I realized was, and this had happened all around me, and it was the first time it happened to me. I'd seen these shuffles and retrenchments and restructures and all the rest. I'd seen them for years, but it never happened to me. until it happened to me, and no one could could substantiate why and why not and all the rest. And I immediately thought, to hell with this. Let me look at plan B. And I looked at my portfolio. I'm like, oh, hang on a second. This is not doing what it's supposed to do, really. I was in a bit of a fantasy land. And immediately then, I adjusted my strategy. I adjusted even the areas which I invest in. Still in Johannesburg, but I literally just went over to 2 suburbs over, and I started investing for cash flow almost immediately. And I looked at the existing properties and I said, how can I squeeze out more cash flow by adding another structure onto the property or another apartment or just doing things differently. I immediately started focusing on cash flow, but I needed that wake up call. And I find in life we know these things, we see these things happen around us, but until they happen to us, you don't. That's when you get a wake up call.
What creates that oblivion where, these things are happening around us, but it's like we're not catching the smoke. It's happening, but you're like nonchalant about it. Does something really have to happen to us first before we catch the wake up call?
I think because sometimes, if you start acting out, if you start acting as if it's going to happen to you, you worry that you're going to invite the thing to happen to you. Maybe there's a bit of that, but I also think that
positive thinking.
When I had to readjust my strategy, it required work. I couldn't just carry on doing I had to adjust the model. I couldn't just carry on. I had to rethink the model. I had to rethink my strategy. I had to rethink, how I was renovating properties, how I was positioning. I had to do work. And sometimes when we think we're on a strategy, we're on a plan, just keep on doing the plan. You actually don't want to consider an alternative plan because to shift requires work. And that wake up call, as much as it confused and it hurt me emotionally that what had happened at the office. I didn't lose my job. I didn't lose my income. Everything on the face of it, I was a lot better off than many other people who had been affected and eventually left. So I was actually fine, but I was shocked at how I'd added so much value to my employer, and it wasn't really considered in the same way, or maybe it was, but it wasn't. My expectations weren't aligned with the experience. So I'm thankful for that because it took me to where I am now. So there are,